A Georgia grand jury in the United States has handed former President Donald Trump his fourth criminal indictment this year in relation to efforts to overturn the election results in the state in 2020. The Republican frontrunner for president in 2024 is charged in this case with 18 allies who allegedly employed tactics to undermine President Joe Biden's win in that state, including the harassment of election workers, making false statements and creating false electoral college documents among 41 counts. Trump's former attorney Rudi Giuliani and his former chief of staff Mark Meadows are among the cohort included in the sweeping 98-page indictment presented by the Atlanta-based Fulton County District Attorney.
Every individual charged in the indictment is charged with one count of violating Georgia's Racketeer, Influenced, and Corrupt Organizations Act through participation in a criminal enterprise in Fulton County, Georgia, and elsewhere to accomplish the illegal goal of allowing Donald J. Trump to seize the presidential term of office beginning on January 20th, 21. Specifically, the participants in association took various actions in Georgia and elsewhere to block the counting of the votes of the presidential electors who were certified as the winners of Georgia's 2020 general election. The indictment alleges that rather than abide by Georgia's legal process for election challenges, the defendants engaged in a criminal racketeering enterprise to overturn Georgia's presidential election result.
All right, now for more, we are across to our United States correspondent, Sherwin Bryce-Pease, who has reported on every single indictment former President Trump is facing this year. Sherwin, a very good afternoon to you, or should I say good morning to you. We knew that this fourth indictment was coming and adds yet another legal wrinkle, not only to Donald Trump this time, but to 18 co-accused, which immediately sets it apart from the other cases he faces. What else is notable in this indictment?
Unati, let's just start there, right? 19 people accused here, Donald Trump and 18 co-accused. And so the theory goes, of all the 19 accused, will anybody at some point during this process turn on each other? That's certainly what prosecutors like to see. They will probably pressure some of the low-lying people on that indictment so that they can get to what is considered the prize, which is the people at the top, the Donald Trumps of this world, the Rudi Giulianis, who was, of course, the attack dog, essentially, as Trump's personal attorney in the aftermath of the 2020 election, and the role that Mark Meadows played. Essentially, the White House chief of staff ran the White House for Donald Trump, and what his role might have been in terms of these subversion tactics that the Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis speaks about in terms of a criminal enterprise. The other issue that Trump and his allies, Unati, will have to grapple with is that Georgia state law allows for court proceedings and trials to be televised. So we haven't seen television cameras inside the state court in New York City when he was first indicted in April by District Attorney Alvin Bragg. Of course, the two federal indictments, he has appeared and pleaded in those indictments, and we have not seen any televised proceedings, and one wonders what sort of additional layer, public window into this trial, what that will do to the American psyche, right? To be able to see the trial play itself out, the body language of the accused, the body language of the defendants, how witness testimony is grappled with and engaged with by both prosecutors and defendants. These will have a bearing on public perception about the legitimacy of this trial. And then the last point I want to make here is that if Donald Trump were to win the Republican nomination and possibly win the election come 2024, he will not be able to pardon himself if he were to be convicted in terms of state charges. A president of the United States has pardoning power in relation to federal crimes, but not state crimes. So If he is convicted, it's very likely that he will have to serve some time. And these racketeering charges, we talk about 5 to 20 years. So a very steep hill to climb here for the former president, Unati.
Indeed, Sheldon, indeed. Now, the 98-page indictment is quite detailed, accusing the 19 individuals of unlawfully conspiring to conduct a criminal enterprise in Fulton County, with Atlanta as the big city within that jurisdiction. Just give us some examples of this alleged criminal enterprise.
Yeah, so the question is essentially, what did they do, right? And the indictment lists what they call under a headline, manner and methods of the enterprise. The first point they make is false statements to and solicitation of state legislators. Essentially, state legislators were responsible for certifying the counts in each state. That then determines which candidate, Joe Biden or Donald Trump, wins the electoral college. Voters that then certify the election and elect the president when the United States Congress certifies the election in January. So they're accused here of false statements to these state legislators. They're accused of false statements to and the solicitation of high-ranking officials. You might remember that infamous call that Donald Trump was recorded with the Georgia Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger, in which he asked them to find the almost 12,000 vote deficit that he was trailing Joe Biden by at the time. They talk about the creation and distribution of false electoral college documents, essentially the documents that would inform which electors then go to certify at Congress. Also the intimidation and harassment of election workers. There were claims against specific election workers. They were targeted, accused of corrupt practices, which have since been legally disavowed. And then, of course, also the unlawful breach of electoral equipment in the state of Georgia. Just among the various charges, the 41 counts that these 19 co-accused will face and have to answer to here, Nati.
I mean, Sherwin, this is a Republican frontrunner for president in 2024. Just how is Donald Trump and his campaign for president responding? You know, just given the additional legal weight he must now carry as he continues to campaign as a Republican frontrunner.
The polls indicate right now that Donald Trump is very, very likely to win the Republican nomination for president and very likely will face Joe Biden come November 2024. He leads his closest rival by 30 points, and that's the very popular governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis. He, of course, is using his old and a regular refrain in these circumstances. He calls it a witch hunt. He calls it part of a broad Democratic campaign to undermine his electoral prospects. How dare they do this? As you know, given his front-runner status in the Republican primaries. They are also, he says, taking away his First Amendment rights, his free speech rights, while doubling down on the very claims that he is being charged with here, making these false statements, this mythical idea that the 2020 election was rigged and stolen. And Fani Willis was also accused by the former president of being a rabid partisan, a racist. You know, she's a black district attorney in a black-dominated Fulton County, which essentially has Atlanta, the city of Atlanta, as the diamond in the crown, if you will. And Fani Willis was asked about these accusations from the former president, and she said, I make my decisions based on the facts and the law. The law is completely non-partisan. That's how decisions are made in every case. Unati.
Sherwin, as we wrap up our interview, just given just how busy the calendar is for Donald Trump, any indication of when this case might go to trial?
19 defendants here. It seems very, very complex and likely to be a very long and winding road in this case, not to mention the case in New York, not to mention the two federal cases, one in Florida, one in the District of Columbia in Washington, D.C., the capital of the United States. And the judges are really have the power here to determine when and where and how this is going to play out. It's a confused mess right now. There's so many prosecutors involved. There's so many judges involved. There's so many defendants involved. In addition to that, Inati, there is an election involved. And so complicated, I think, is the word.